Hello, Dirt Designers. This is Marcos, and this is our week 6 to week 7 briefing video. And this is an important one, so please be sure you watch to the end. We've kind of got two assignments ending and beginning at the same time. There's lots of details to go through. So let's get into it here. So we're ending our baby board book project this week, and the assignment for this week is to finalize your files and send them as packaged InDesign files so that I can take them from you and then go through them, make sure they're all good, maybe contact you if there's stuff that are questions or there are needs, and then submit the entire set of files from the class to the printer. So that's why this final deadline of next Thursday is important, because I'll be working on Friday and over next weekend so that I can upload everything by Monday morning. So please be in contact with me as needed, but let's go over what that entails. And we're also going to be going over the storybook at the second part of the video. So first, for the baby board book, we had a review session. Great results happening for everyone. Some of you are just about done and ready to go. Others are still working. Depending on who you are, make sure you focus your energy on this. Also knowing that you have the other assignment and you have all your other classes. So there's a lot of stress here, but manage your time, get rest, be productive, make sure you're focusing on the things that are important. And when working on this final files, basically you need to apply any revisions or anything we talked about in class or via email. Review your text one last time. It was helpful to have the read alouds in class, and yeah, do that one more time. Maybe ask a friend to proofread it, maybe read it out loud to somebody or a few people, and just make sure all the details are right so that the wording is good. And then we get into the technical side. I'm gonna need you to go into your InDesign file, open it up, and just go through and do a few things. One of those things that is critical is that we need to make sure we have our bleeds in place. I'll show you that specifically here in a second. And once you've gone through all that, once you've done your spell check, once you know that's everything looks good and correct, once you're sure that all your any attachments, any images that you bring in, like illustrations, or if you bring in fonts that are not Adobe Typekit, you have to make sure those are all connected and linked on your InDesign file, and then you'll package it. And packaging it basically is a process of bringing everything together into a folder, so that when you send that folder, it should contain everything I need, from your illustration links to your type, and any additional files that you may have added in there. So let's kind of look at that. So we're working with this template that I think most of you have been working with, and if you aren't using this, this is for sure the time where you need to be using this. Now, I made the mistake of letting loose an older template where the typography here for the dirt type was a font that wasn't working, and that was an older template. I apologize for that, but I do have I have uploaded in this week's final files part 6 assignment a new template. If it's making you crazy and you can't stand seeing that pink, feel free to download that and use that template. But you don't have to worry about it if it's. I will fix that on my end once I get your files. But there is that link in case you want. And on this cover, again, make sure you're keeping the dirt logo here. There's a white box around it on the cover. On the spine, there's not a white box, and it could change in colors. It could be white. It could even be a color, but depending on what your text on your spine is here. But on the cover, it's a white box with black type. If you're going to change that, you got to let me know. And also in here is a little thing where it's has your name. If you want to type in your name here, great. I can do it too, of course. Things to remember: there's a white box behind the text here that's has some opacity. So many of you have designed around that. And the spine, make sure you have your name and your title of your book and your name. And I would orient it going from up to down, so that when the book is laying down like this, it's on the table, you can read it right side up. You also might want to consider doing something that stays horizontal, like the cover on the top of the spine, some graphic or something that might look cool if the book is on a shelf and it's upright. So you might have something there that's kind of cool. And then the bleeds, the red outline here at the edge is considered the bleed. That means the part that extends beyond the live area. The live area is actually the size of the book, and the live area is where the white stops. So where the white stops is where your actual book will show, and anything beyond that. And I'm having a second thoughts here. Is it the red line? No, it's the white. It's the white box. It's where the white box ends, and you have to make sure that if your images, unless you're having like a white background book, if your images come to the edge, your images have to continue outside onto this red line area. And you have to make sure you have either a larger image, or that you've drawn it or extend it in a way where there's more image than you need. The reason for that is when they want to be able to trim this book and not have to worry about there being a white line, because your image got cut a little short. So it's key to do that. It's also important to remember not to keep things too close to the edge, and particularly type. Like you can put things that don't matter close to the edge, but if it's type, you got to be careful. And here's an example of it applied. So here we see the same template, the white box with the dirt logos here. Here, this person's chosen to make the dirt logo white on the edge to go along with the type on the spine. And here, if you can see it, there's a little red box here, and you can see the person's name kind of gets cut off. And that's indicating that the font that this person used for their name was not included. So when I opened this file, it wasn't able to connect to a font, and now it made it bigger than it is. And this would be a time where I would have to then go and reach out to the person and say, hey, I need the font that you used. Please make sure to send it. And packaging avoids that. So make sure you package it, because there's 14 of you, and I have limited time, and I don't want to have to be running back and forth, and I don't want to be bugging you. You don't want me to bug you about things that are missing. So that's an example of what happens. So make sure your fonts are connected or are included when you package it. Make sure you package it, they will be included. Or even better, if you use only Adobe Typekit fonts, then you don't have to worry about it. There won't be folders of fonts. The font that I replaced, the back text here, is an Adobe Typekit font. So it'll just automatically work if you're using Adobe and have a subscription. So again, here you can see here in this little animation here that I'm doing with my fingers, that this shows the actual book and to the size of the book, like what you'll actually see. And this shows the extra needed for it to be a bleed. And that's what you need to be doing, extending. If it's a color like that, just extend your box. If it's an image, your image needs to continue on a little bit. And maybe it just means enlarging it 10% or so. Maybe that's okay, maybe not. But that's something to deal with. And I warned you early on, so don't get mad at me. All right, so when you package it, basically everything's done. You save it. I would make sure to just save it, and then if you go up to File in InDesign, the very first tab item, and you go down near the bottom, there's a thing called Package. If you click on that, you're going to be packaging your files. You'll get this little folder, and the important thing to see is here where this little arrow is in the summary. It says fonts, 5 fonts, 2 missing. So here it's telling me that the font on this page is actually missing. Oops. And you should go back and make sure you have those fonts included. And actually, this 2 fonts, that's my fault. Those are my fonts that are missing. So you're probably going to get that. But if there's others that you're using, it'll also increase that number. And then if there's any other things that like links of images, here it says links and images, 0 links found, 0 modified. So, but it might say some are missing here. Like if you drew a bunch of stuff in Illustrator and you don't have those connected in InDesign, if they got disconnected somehow, then that's going to show up. So you make sure those are there. And then once you do that, you basically hit package, and it runs everything together and creates a final folder for you. That's what you'll upload to the final files folder on our Google Drive. And here's just an explanation on Canvas as always. And like I said, there's a new board book template. You can tell it's new with the uppercase board book. That's the one to click on. And then there's also this a further little demo PDF here. If you click on here, it'll explain what I just explained to you, and without my annoying voice, it'll just be something you can read through if you need more details on how to package it in Design file. And again, once you get that done, start loading this up. You can do this as soon as possible. The sooner the better, because then I can start working on it or have some of my staff work on it so that we don't have to suffer over the weekend next weekend. Okay, so let's now go into baby board book. Awesome, great job, everybody, and keep going with it. And before I get into my speech here, also remember, like, still be in contact with me. Like, if you got revisions, if you're not sure, if you got questions, email me. Many of you have been good at that. Some of you are more silent. So I want to be annoyed. I want to be annoyed about all the emails. I want to be complaining to my wife and kids, like, these students keep emailing me questions. I can't take it. Like, I want that to happen. So please do that. All right. Okay, so storybook time. Now I want to just zoom back a little bit and talk about the broader nature of what we're trying to do here, and as collaborators with DIRT, and as designers who are trying to fulfill the mission that DIRT has in enhancing literacy among kids and families, and in a little bit of an ironic way, what we're trying to do through literacy is to kind of go beyond the traditional academic literacy, which is about which is kind of a idea of like the mechanics of reading and learning the alphabet and learning how to put words together and learning to understand a language and learning to hear a full sentence and learning to speak in full sentences and write them down. All that stuff, of course, is super important, and of course is part of what the drive for learning to read is about. But really, for us, the more important, a higher level outcome for us is to go beyond academic literacy and to understand the value of what narrative stories have to offer us as humans, and how it can be a useful tool in helping us in navigating through life. So I had this quote here from this guy named Andrew Klavan, who really puts the idea of the power of stories in a nice way, and I'm just going to read it here. Stories are not just entertainment. A story records and transmits the experience of being human. It teaches us what it's like to be who we are. Nothing but art can do this. There is no science that can capture the inner life. No words can describe it directly. We can only speak of it in metaphors. We can only say it's like this story, this picture, this song. So this really explains in a kind of a beautiful way that there's this intangible power of stories that helps us connect to something that's really hard to explain, that goes beyond the science or goes beyond like data points, and speaks to us in a way that has to do with our inner life, our soul, the things that make us valuable as individuals, the thing that makes us understand what life is about in a really core way. And what that really leads to in a bigger way is just in our efforts to do this is having our efforts towards our storytelling and our DIRT books really connect to an understanding the human experience, understanding the way that life is for us on this planet, or within the experiences we have as human beings, and being able to confront that, the good and the bad of it, and being able to deal with the fact that we're not perfect people. In nature, things happen. There's death, there's destruction, there's chaos, but there's also beauty and goodness, and there's, most importantly, love, and that all those things come together in a way that that aren't, even though they're opposites, they work together in tangent, in a synergy that makes our lives, and that sometimes things go well and sometimes they don't, and that life is by nature unfair, and that love can overcome all that, and that love is an important aspect to know about, because it's the thing that defeats all the terrible things that happens in life, and brings us to a higher level. So that all has to do with this, like, sort of the Enlightenment, the things that happen with as we progress as a civilization. The key part of that way back was when we recognized the value of each of us having an inner life. Before that understanding, we were just kind of like animals and every man for themselves. And until there was a recognition through our culture that each inner life matters, that's where human rights, that's where the idea of like valuing a person eventually, to no matter who they are and what they think. And that took time, and that's okay that it took time, because we came from a very raw state of understanding. And through having these value systems, understanding that there's a higher level of goodness above us, or that's a metaphor, like wherever it is, that with that understanding, we can then reflect back to the idea that we are each individually valuable. And that's an important aspect. At the same time, it's going to be about like seeing life as it is and not as we wish it to be. And what I want to address with that is that a lot of the things we learn and are trained to do in our education system and our culture is this idea that we can fix things through systems, or that systems are broken and they're responsible for the problems we have. And that somehow there's a way that man can be adjusted through processes that will make them better. And the fact is, we're all kind of broken people in a way. We all have the ability to uplift ourselves from that state, but that human condition of it will always be there. So I don't want to avoid the ugliness of life or the things that make us not work at our best, and to address those in some way. So seeing life as it is, not as we wish it would be. And it's great to wish for better lives, and we should do that, but we have to understand that we have to build that. And to build that, it's really about providing a belief in a greater good. And there's a lot of ways to interpret greater good, from religious beliefs, from a way of looking at what it means to have something more important than us being just material, us just being cells and everything evolved. The idea of a greater good is what allows us to have morals, because there's a lawgiver that provides us with a moral code. Then if there is a moral code, then there's a author to that moral code. If we have DNA, if we're coded as people, there's an author to that coding. And whatever that means to you, that idea as a concept is vitally important in the stories we're telling, that there is an ultimate good, and that it's not just all subjective, that there are things that are true, good, and beautiful. And speaking of true, good, and beautiful, we now bring all that important kind of thinking and way of being, and now zoom that down into our storybooks. And in our last class, we had a chance, and again, my apologies for not giving you a lot of time, but we had a chance to look at some potential stories and select them. And maybe it's cool that they were rapid like that you had a few minutes in class to kind of think about what you want to do, because now actually it is good, because in life and in design life, for sure, you don't get around getting to choose what you design. So I take back my apology. I should be telling you guys exactly what book I want you to design, but I want to give you guys choices. And that choice you're making is about finding a story, a classic story from literature or from folklore or from culture, whether it's Western or whether it's from other kinds of cultures. I want all those. I want all those variations of ideas of thinking kind of brought together into this collection of dirt books that you're seeing here. And I'll go through some of these books as examples coming up here, but basically I just want to talk a little bit about the idea of how you can take the story you've now picked, and maybe you're sitting here now thinking, why did I pick that story? And I didn't even read it, or I read it again and like, oh my God, what a horrible, like so many terrible things happened in this story. And I thought it was cute. But good news, there's a lot you can do with the story you've been given, a lot from this range of kind of 4 categories that I have listed here. So let's talk about those. So one option is to take your story and treat it as traditional text. The traditional text option means you just create a book using the story as you've been given it. You know, maybe you edit some of it, maybe you make it a little easier to understand, but basically you're staying true to the story. I'll show you some examples of that, and that's a great way to do it. And that if you're not interested in, you know, turning on the lights in the room that have your writing editing skills, you don't have to. But before you decide against that, the room that has the lights that turn on your writing and editing skills are part of your skill sets, or they're not. I don't want to hear I'm a designer, not a writer. Like, no, it's the same thing. We're expressing communications visually, and those letters aren't just type, they're also words. And I know that many of you already demonstrated your ability to be masterful over words by writing your baby board books. Your author's already of a children's book. Let's stop right here. Let's put pause. You guys have authored a children's storybook. You each now have that cred. Beginning of the class, maybe you had done it in another class. That's great. I'm glad if you did. But if maybe you had not, and if you hadn't, now you have. So using traditional text, that's fine. That doesn't make you less. You might think your story is just perfect the way it is, and it's believe me, it probably is. It's been around for thousands of years or hundreds of years, not thousands, hundreds of years, maybe thousands, depending on what you picked. Anyway, so from traditional text, the second grade or level, I'm sorry, is to upgrade your text. So basically, it's kind of taking the story and maybe changing the context and putting it in modern times, and making it basically the same plot, but instead of it being, you know, a certain kind of set of creatures or a certain kind of people, maybe they're people and they turn into creatures, maybe they become part of the modern times. I'll show you an example of that, but that's actually a nice little step to make it, to take a story that you've maybe chosen and found hard to relate to. Now you can make it relatable. And then another version is what I'm calling revised story. So you write a new story as your traditional story as the basis for your story, but you change the outcome, you change the plot, you bring a twist to it. And this is a little dangerous. Like, I don't want necessarily for you to think that certain stories didn't have the right moral outcomes that you wanted them to have, or didn't teach the right lessons. The reason I would want you to maybe do this is for you to understand what the intended lesson was, the intended moral of a story that you were given, and then say, okay, I can find a different way around to understand that. And this is where, like, understanding human nature comes in. Like, I don't want you to switch stories around because of some utopian goal that makes this unrealistic story that doesn't help kids, because it doesn't really teach them what realities are ahead of them. And then the fourth option, which is sort of the furthest out, is you start with a certain story now, and you're thinking about things, and maybe you're thinking about revising it, and maybe it goes even further in the evolution, and basically you find yourself with a whole new story. So creating a new original story developed off your selected assignment traditional story. I want still for you to be able to say, I had a prompt of X story, and that became my new story. And they're not really related, but the design process, the editing process led me towards that. And again, same warning here, like, make sure you're thinking about the bigger idea of what you're teaching in the story, and make sure it's reflecting the realities of life and the things that all the stories that have in common in our choices do, which is to help show young people the dilemmas, the situations, the opportunities, the choices they made, the mistakes they made, the outcomes that happen based in these stories, so that they can then learn and see how life works and how they can do or not do the same things in order to make sure they're able to succeed even better. Okay, so let's look at some of these stories. And this tortoise and hare story, I'm not going to go through it in detail, but this is basically an example of just taking a traditional story, and because it's already animals, and because it's really well known, I think one of the more well-known children's classics from Aesop, kind of just sticking to the idea of the story, but then rewriting it kind of from scratch and keeping the story, but writing it in a way that's friendly for kids and not from the words of Aesop. And so that's kind of like option 2, right? Which was to kind of upgrade the text, take a tradition or upgrade the text. Now, if somehow the hare, if the hare or the rabbit won the race, and because the turtle did something dumb, then that would become a revised story. And again, like this is a dangerous, like we don't, slow and steady wins the race is sort of the idea of this. And if you want to change it to say something else, you can, but and I will push back if it's not making sense to me in terms of those kind of lessons you're learning, because if the tortoise lives fast and beats the tortoise, I mean, what are we teaching them? So, and maybe it's good. I'm not saying it can't be good. So that's a way of looking at a way to upgrade text from traditional text. Now I want to take you through page by page with a couple of these. So I've switched over to the blurb store we have, and these links for these books I'm showing you here are going to be provided in the Canvas. But basically, this is the next one, and this is a book called, a story called A Handful of Clay. And I'm going to use this in the example that we show when I show you how to do your assignment. This will be our kind of example. But let's talk a little bit about the book now that we have this here. So the book is going to be 8 by 10, like you saw. The dirt logo is going to be here. When you open it up, this is going to be a cover here, and this is actually going to be the first. This will be a thick stock. This will be the paper, thinner stock, and this is the first page of your books when you're counting. So it's going to be a little different than your baby board book. It's not a self cover; it's plus cover. So if you're doing 16 pages, it'll be 16 pages starting here plus cover, which is the front, the inside cover, and then the back and the inside back. We'll talk about that more later, but just to give you a sense. And on this first page is kind of the little signature book where our dirt scribble is here, and on the bottom they're going to be your name and this year as a little kind of text line. And then the first spread in the book, pages 2 and 3, are going to look just like this. There's no changing, except we're going to take portraits of everybody and put your portrait here, and we're going to have this text block in here that talks about you and where you're from, being at Parsons, and then a little bit about your approach to the book, or basically it could also be about what the book story is about and the lesson it offers. And then everything else up here and down here are just standard text explaining who we are as a brand and what we do. And then when you go to page 3 and 4, now you start the book. And the way you're starting the book is through what I'm calling a title spread. And basically it kind of almost repeats the cover. It's a little formal step in book design. And here and it's different than the cover in this case, but it could be similar to the cover. But it's got the title, the original author, and then it credits Ivy here by saying it's written and illustrated by Ivy. So it sort of acknowledges that the story is from a classic author, and then also acknowledges that it was revised and, of course, illustrated by you or whoever is doing this. So this is a good example of a story that is a classic that is revised a little bit in the text just to make it friendlier and easier to understand in the eyes and ears of us today. And it uses an illustration style that's simple but well executed. It takes advantage of sort of the scanned paper texture and uses this kind of woodcut style, and offers this real story about like appreciating who you are as a raw person. Like a handful of clay can then become something, but to become something, it has to go through a process, the process of life, the process of like struggling and learning and doing things that seem unexpected, and most importantly of suffering, being shaped, going into the oven, and maybe not even understanding why, and maybe not at first liking the outcome of what you got, just an empty pot. What is my life about? But then understanding that the things you do, the processes you go through, the suffering you experience, can then plant seeds that will sprout into something maybe small at first, but that can then blossom in a beautiful way, literally, into something that brings the purpose of your life and shows you that all those things were worth it and necessary to get to the point you want to get to create a vessel, and then to fill that vessel with something that it cultivates into beauty and truth. So that's a great example of us kind of simply drawn, but simple, I say, but well done, with a great message, and stays true to the classicness of it while also being kind of contemporary and fun. And now my thing isn't working. Okay, so let me go. Okay. Oh, I get it. All right. And then the next book. Oh man. Hold on. I had this all worked out. The next book I want to show. Nope. Okay, now you got to see my thing. Oh, come on. Okay, pull this down. The next book I want to show, we talked about this. This is a book called The Selfish Giant. And The Selfish Giant is a story by, why am I blanking out? By Oscar Wilde, sorry. And it's one of the, Oscar Wilde is well known, kind of this writer who was a little poet writer, who was kind of a rebel, and a Victorian rebel, it's whatever that means, who wrote a lot of famous books. But The Selfish Giant is a short story that maybe I never heard of it before, so it's a little poetry story that was taken on by the student, and the approach of it was to revise the text a little bit into, well, a lot of it, I should say, into kind of a little bit of a comic book style, creating these little captions that were the text, and then this sort of comic book style with these inserted images, and kind of like a really good mix of like being comic book, but also doing storybook. And I'll just page through this quickly. You can see it tells the story of a giant who's got a beautiful garden, but then he walls out the children, and the things go dark, and the giant is lonely and misses the children that were once annoying. And the children find a way to get in, and anyway, I'm not going to go into the details of the story, but basically the giant gets old, and there's a special relationship with the kid, and the kid, and well, here we can see the giant dies eventually. So again, there's a being unafraid to tackle the things that happen in life, which I think is needed even more desperately than normal these days. An interesting thing that this student did was, because they valued the actual story, or because they also recognized that the comic book style is maybe more about visual, they created the full story here in a couple of spreads that you can just read through, and kind of almost like a bonus for the book. Okay. And then another example, and this is the idea of like taking a story that's well known, Sleeping Beauty, and then revising it to the point where the only thing that's the same are the basic foundational ideas of Sleeping Beauty and the title, but that the story gets radically changed into something that's fully modernized. And also, on another note, this is something that can kind of demonstrate how to use more of a graphic treatment in illustration, and not be all upset that you don't have a whimsical style that you want to use, but you can kind of really just use vectors and drawings and patterns. And in the story, it's about a girl who falls asleep, and similar theme, but she's living in the city, and she's from today, and it's very graphic in the way it's shown. And she would essentially dream about this other world she's in, and how she loves that world, and she's her most beautiful self in that world, and has a relationship with our friend the moon, and kind of becomes I don't know, I don't want to say addicted, but into this world. It's so much, but eventually it becomes apparent that, and the moon counsels her to say that it's time for you to see the sun, and to meet the day, and become part of another dimension, which is daytime. So it sort of mixes the idea of sort of a supernatural fantastical existence, and also makes for like a beautiful way to read a story at night with someone as a bedtime story. So that's another example. And then this is an example of taking a traditional story and then again modernizing a little bit, but sticking pretty much to the story of having a king. And I'm sorry, I think she brought the idea that that this king was having a contest and wanted to see who would be. He didn't have an heir. He didn't have any children, and needed to find the best person in the kingdom, and made a contest to give each contestant a pack of seeds and to see which ones would grow the seeds the most or the best result. But what he actually did, I don't know why the story runs out here. I'll have to fix that. But what he actually did was give them bogus seeds that didn't work. And all the contestants came with these, even though their seeds didn't work, they ended up, I guess, cheating and bringing these beautiful bouquets that they grew. But the rabbit came with an empty pot saying that nothing grew for him. And that showed the king that he was actually the honest person and the one worthy of being king, and didn't lie or didn't cheat. So that's that story. Whoops. And then this one is called The Flower Elves. This is a Chinese folk tale. And this does just a great job of like really creating a beautiful book with just this great mix of kind of almost looking like it's a vintage, classic, old set of illustrations, and yet still feeling really contemporary, and also still honoring Chinese tradition and not trying to look all kind of cool and hip, but instead just being really thoughtful and beautiful, and but still with this kind of this roughness to it, with the way that it's a little bit got a grain to it, and even dot patterns and the colors. It's just extremely well done. Like it's just really amazing. And I think a lot of it, and it took time, of course, but a lot of it has to do with like the person doing this, like their attention to detail, their taste level, their ability to like really have a vision and stick to it and stay consistent, use the story as a way to give you what your spreads are going to be, and just execute, I guess is the best way to say it. So that's that book, and just a few more. And then sort of on the flip side of that, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but if you're, after seeing that last one, you're like, I can't draw like that. Are you crazy? You can draw like something, right? And you can draw the way you draw. And this person, Tasha here, said she could draw like this. And not only that, with no apologies, she liked to draw like this. And this is an example, not just in the drawing, but in terms of the way the story was handled. So this was a story that was based on a story called The Stonecutter, and I think one of you may have picked that story. But the stonecutter was like a guy who was a stonecutter, and he lived in Japan, and he wished he could be. He saw how beautiful the mountain was. He wished he could be the mountain, and then became the mountain. He wished he saw the sky. I wish I could be the sky, and then was the sky. He saw this. He just kept wanting more and more, until finally he realized who he was is what he wanted. So this Day of Adventure is not the stonecutter, but it's based on the exact same premise and storyline, where there's a little girl from Tokyo who daydreams and is adventurous, and you can see by her knees and her little band-aid there, she's just very active and on the prowl for good times. And in the same way, decides to be that, she sees the cat, she wants to be the cat, and here's her band-aid, it's her, and she becomes that. And then she gets chased by a dog and into this thing, and becomes part of this dancing set of cats, but then sees a bird and wants to fly, so she becomes a bird. And then the bird sees the sky, and she wants to be the sky and becomes the sky. And then she's liking this guy, but then she gets bored, and then she hears her mother calling and remembers that what she really wants to be is who she already is, and comes racing back to her mom, and has a deeper understanding of like the beauty of imagination plus also valuing who you are and what you have, as simple as it might be. So that's that story. And then one more here is, nope, that's not one more, that's the same thing. Okay, so that's that. Now let me get back to my thing here. Oh my God, I'm not gonna find it. Here it is. Okay, so those are what we looked at. Oh, and then there's another one here, actually. Let me do this one. I know this is a long video, sorry. Okay, so Can I Have a Cookie is basically a great example of how you would take a story, like a well-known story like the ant and the grasshopper, which is about about ants who are planning for winter, and the grasshopper is like, what are you doing? Let's have fun. And doesn't really do proper planning, or just is too much in the now, and then is left with nothing in the winter and dies. So here we have the grasshopper and the ant translated into personas of little girls in a family. A grasshopper and ant are two sisters, and one's baking away and the other's having fun. And the one baking is obviously the ant, and the one having fun is obviously the grasshopper. But in the end, the results from all the hard work pay off, and she's got cookies. And the grasshopper girl, who's actually ironically reading the grasshopper and the ant down here on the floor, which is pretty smart, or not reading it, threw it aside, suddenly wants cookies. And the mother, who, again, the grasshopper and ant appear here in the apron, tell her that no, it doesn't work that way. You didn't help, you don't get cookies. And of course, that's tragic. But then, unlike the story, instead of the grasshopper perishing, there's redemption, and the little girl learns from what happened and then begins to work and clean up and do things to earn her way towards having her cookie. So I think that's just so smart of a way to take a story and make it completely different, yet the same in many ways. Okay, so okay, and then we went over these books in class. I'm just going to go through. Oh, you know what? Just one more, please. Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star is obviously, or Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Scar is a play on the simple song Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, which is just and also a reflection of maybe the mindset of young people today. Maybe you might say it's a little down, but I think it's I think that's okay. So, twinkle, twinkle, little scar, you are loved the way you are. When the blazing sun is gone, when he nothing shines upon, I can't seem to see the light. It's in this never-ending night. I hear voices in my head, words that are better left unsaid. Tremble are these two hands, leg not strong enough to stand. I sit alone in the dark, try my best to find a spark. The light that shines within slowly seeps through my skin. Twinkle, twinkle, little scar, you are loved the way you are. So really that was just about just writing a beautiful rendition of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star in a new voice, in a new way, in a new mindset. And of course, on the design side, it was about creating a real simple design, because you want to focus on the text that uses an illustration, a style that's very easy to connect to. I'll say easy to do, but I don't mean it that way, but you know what I mean. There's not a lot of complicated layering or things that are going to take a lot of time. It's confidently drawn, and really is about the story. So I think this is a good example for you guys to see. Okay, so let's keep going so we can get this video over with. All right, so what we're doing for our first assignment, we're reflecting what we did the last time. So we've been through this process once already, so we're doing the same thing. We're creating a research concept deck. And basically that research concept deck is going to be a presentation that covers what your story is, or at least the story you're starting with, and it could evolve. And if it's changing, if there's going to be changing your story, if you're completely regretting, you have a different idea, or if you didn't select and you want to pick your own story, you must be contacting me before Thursday. I don't want to see a presentation where a story you picked without, you got the collabs, you gotta tell me, because it might not be right. There might be something might not, I need to know. So please share with me. I want to hear from you. But once you do that, basically, then it's going to be about creating a deck that's going to, let's just go through this. That's going to do the following. It's going to have this title page. And then the first step in your deck is going to be to actually tell us what your story is about. Not only like who wrote it or where it's from, of course that, but then let's hear a short blurb about what the story is about. And most importantly, I want you in the last line here, I want you to tell us what the moral of your story is, what the lesson is, what is it that it's trying to teach. That's really important. You must do that, dissect your story and tell me what the moral is. And then from there, we're going to take a step back and do some inspiration, some research on kids' books, start looking at kids' books that are more on the story book level and not baby level, but older. And please understand that is that the audience here, I think it was one of these texts, the audience here is kids ages 2 to 4, like it's still preschool. But then it also can go up from ages 5 to 9. And when it's 5 to 9, it starts becoming something that they can read on their own. And again, the same way with before, like you can decide, I want my book to be really about a kid holding a book and being able to read it themselves. So you might choose to make it simpler to read. But that's sort of the offshoot. I would rather have it be about a story that can be read aloud by somebody that's more sophisticated. They can understand the lesson. Okay, so let's get some examples of books that inspire you for different reasons and list those reasons and talk about those reasons. Let's get some visual inspiration, dive into like what you think might be your approach illustration wise, be realistic about what you can do and what can't do, but also be ambitious. If you want to try something new, just make sure you're able to do it in the timely way. Think about your typography, what might be your typography. And of course, this is all kind of loose, but just let's start taking the ingredients out of the cupboards and putting them on the counter to see what we're going to make here. And then visual inspiration, like getting more specific, like, okay, this is something that I think I want my book to be like, and this is kind of the typography direction. And then at last, end it with just writing about your design approach, like what you think you're going to do with the story, how you might change the story or how you might stick to the story. Maybe there are some options here that as she's put here, and just be able to have a statement that says what you're gonna try to do with your book. And then, of course, always remember to say thank you. Okay, so here's an overview of what your assignment should look like with these components, and they're listed on our Slack page, which has I would read this. This will give you, it's kind of a lot, but it'll give you everything I've been trying to say in pieces all at one time, including a list of what you need to be doing. It also has the list of books that we looked at and more with links to the blurb, so you can kind of click through them easily. There's more here than we looked at, so check those out. And then also below that, as you keep scrolling on the canvas, this is probably the biggest one of all, I also have the list of stories we had to choose from, and I listed out the people who have claimed certain stories. But not everybody's here because then everybody chose and one of you were absent. So this is the time to look at these again, to select a place that if you want to just see what your text is, you can look at it here, but all the stories are here listed. Oops. Okay, so just to wrap it up, we're gonna have a cover page, an overview page, a survey of past design illustrations, and there might not be, if you're going to show past design renditions of your book, there may not be any. So that might be something you don't do if there is nobody who has ever made a book from your story. But if there is people who've made a book from your story, it might be nice to see those. And then your research inspiration, potential approaches, and your written outline. Okay, that's it. So 2 things going on at once, lots to do. Spring break is just around the corner though, so keep that in mind. In class, as we discussed, we're going to meet in the classroom with the option to meet over Zoom. I'll have the Zoom channel open on the computer in class, and I'll be there. And if many of you like to be in class, of course, and having that spirit of camaraderie or having that human connection, and some of you might want to be like on the go if you're taking a spring break, but I want you to be there. Like, that doesn't mean you don't have to be there. You have to be there. either in Zoom or in person. All right, so that's it. We will talk to you guys on Thursday, but I hope to hear from each of you before that. Thanks so much.